Carl Lanning here from Brazos River Charter School with This Week in History, specifically January 26th through February 1st. Well, let's see. On January the 30th of 1835, the first assassination attempt on a sitting president. A man by the name of Richard Lawrence. He was a house painter who was also thoroughly deranged. The man believed that he was the heir to the British throne, that he was owed reparations by the United States government for damages done during the American Revolution, which, if I remember right, we won. Anyway, since the government wouldn't pay him, he decided to take it out on President Jackson. Andrew Jackson was leaving a funeral service that had been held in the Congress. When he came out into the foyer, Mr. Lawrence stepped out from behind a pillar and at a distance of 6 feet produced a pistol. One exactly like that. Leveled it at the president, pulled the trigger, and all that went off was the percussion cap. Jackson immediately raised his cane, the 67-year-old man, charged at him, and at point-blank range, he produced another pistol, pulled the trigger, and it did exactly the same thing. The percussion cap went off, but the gun did not fire. Jackson got in a few pretty good licks before Lawrence was tackled. Congressman Davy Crockett happened to be nearby, and Jackson was fine. The pistols the very next day were taken out and recapped. That's all they did. They did not reload it. All they did was replace the percussion cap. Both pistols fired perfectly on the first attempt. Someone calculated the odds of doing this as being 1 in 125,000 for two pistols of that type to fail basically at the same time. So, lucky man. Speaking of Davy Crockett, though, who happened to be there, Phil Collins was born January 30th of 1951. Now, what does Phil Collins have to do with frontiersman Davy Crockett? Well, as it turns out, Collins is the owner of the world's largest private collection of Alamo artifacts. Apparently, he became fascinated by the Battle of the Alamo from watching the 1950s Disney movie about Davy Crockett. He owns a number of items. It's a pretty amazing collection. A leather pouch that belonged to Davy Crockett, one of 4 rifles known to have belonged to him, and a Bowie knife that was known to be in the possession of Jim Bowie at the Battle of the Alamo. Right now, he is in discussions with the Alamo Society to have his collection be put on display as soon as a suitable museum is built to house the collection. So, and in more music-related news, on January the 30th of 1969, the Beatles performed their last public performance, the famous Apple Rooftop Concert. The film, a part of this, is available on YouTube. The whole thing was not filmed, but parts of it are. If you're a Beatle fan, I'm sure you've seen it. If you're not, it's really cool. The impromptu concert was shut down when the police received a noise complaint from an accountant that worked at a nearby Bank of Scotland building. I would imagine the man is pretty lucky that they kept his name anonymous. But, the Beatles. And I mentioned last week that if a young man were driving up to your house in a Nash car, that you might want to grab the shotgun and chase him off. John Nash was an automobile innovator in a lot of ways. Nash vehicle, he worked for several companies. He formed his own in 1916. From 1916 until 1957, Nash vehicles were produced under their own name. Then the company was bought by American Motors and produced for another 10 years. But he introduced a number of different things. The first American-made compact car, the first American muscle car, unibody construction, the heating ventilation system that Nash developed is essentially used to this day. However, he also gave us something that was handy on long road trips or camping trips. And that was the back seats. Well, the front seats, really. You see, in a Nash vehicle, the back of the front seat would lie down to be essentially level with the seat of the back, thus forming basically a full-size bed. So, They became very popular with teenagers in the 1950s and 60s. If not the Nash car itself, if you were mechanically inclined, you could remove the seats and install them inside of another car. So again, if you were a parent and you saw somebody come up in a Nash, or they had Nash seats, you grab the shotgun and tell them to be on their way. So, John Nash. Well, that's it for this week, but just to let you know what's coming up. Next week we're going to find out why that woman and that man may be the luckiest people who ever lived. Thanks for being with us. I'm Carl Lanning from Brazos River Charter School, and we look forward to seeing you right here next week.